Hello and welcome to this demo video for the detailed costing and quote spreadsheet. Now, as you can see by the number of tabs at the bottom, this is a quite a comprehensive spreadsheet. So I do need to apologize. This demo video is probably going to be quite long, but I need to explain it all. It's a very detailed spreadsheet. It does a lot of stuff. It's got a lot of detail in it if you want to use it, but it also just allows you to overwrite all of that. So a lot of the stuff you may see two or three times and wonder, but why do I need to have it two or three times? It's because there are various stages where you can actually just choose to overwrite it. So the process kind of flows. So you don't have to go all over the place to set stuff up. So let me try and explain to you how this works. And I've color coordinated the tab so it makes more sense. This intro and setup tab is just with links and things. You don't have to worry about that. There's nothing on there that you can do. There are four tabs at the end, the blue ones and these two black ones. These are the ones that you set up. So these ones you'd set up first. Once these are set up, you'd essentially then save the spreadsheet as a default file. And each time you want, just do it save as a new quote, save as a new quote. So these four tabs at the end, you're only going to update those in theory once at the beginning. And then as you go along, if your prices change or you need to update something, you'll go and update the default version so that every quote you do from that point on will have the new updated default. So there's a lot of stuff to fill in here, and this might take you a while, but once it's set up, you then effectively set up to run with it each time you want to do a quote. The red ones are the ones that you then use when you're doing a quote, and there will be a lot of duplication of stuff that you've already done on other tabs, but it's really just a case of do you want to use it or do you want to override it type of thing. And I'll show you how all that works. So the first part of the video, we'll pretty much break it into three. The first part will be the blue sections and the black section, which are the ones that you set up first. Then I'll go through the red sections, which is what you do each time you do a quote. And then what I will do is go through the green sections, which is all the automation that's done off of that once you've completed the red sections. All right, so let's get going on what you need to do first. And I'll start with the easiest tab first, which is the logo tab. You can insert your logo. If you go to this cell over here and go to the top to insert and say pictures and place in cells, not over cells. You want to place it in the cell. Now, once you place it in the cell, it'll ask you where you want to go. You get it from the folder and insert it, and it'll put a picture inside of the cell. That will mean that this will then appear on other pages where the logo is told to appear. Now, this is 3 parts width and 2-part height. So for example, because my logo's got a white background, I can it shows white behind that, so it kind of looks okay. Whereas if you've got a more square logo, for example, or something like that, it might distort it. So what you then need to do is you can actually just go and make an image, get your logo, make sure that the image is 3-part width, 2-part height, and insert it into the cell, and then you can essentially make whatever image you want to with the background, how you want it. Just make sure there's 2 parts, 3 parts wide, 2 parts high, and insert into the logo. Whatever into the cell, whatever you insert here will then appear on the other sheets. So that one's relatively straightforward. Then you've got your settings tab. It looks a bit overwhelming, but don't panic. I've broken it down into sections. This part on the right-hand side here, these are really just, they're different tabs. On your, these are the optional data. So on your other sheets, you've got things like project name, client company, quote reference. Most of these on the project details. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But you can essentially say which ones are compulsory. Because, for example, you may go, well, I don't always have a client reference for the quote, or I don't always have a client VAT number, or you may not even have a project name or something like that. So these things, if you want them to be in and then you want them to be compulsory, then just select the tick mark. If they're not compulsory, you can uncheck it. It will still have the option to add it, but it won't. The spreadsheet won't insist on it if you've cleared off this little tick mark. So when you come across those later on, and if anything shows as required, and you go, well, I don't always need to add this, then you can come here and remove it from this list. This section over here, these are just general text boxes on the quote. When I get to the quote, you'll see where they are. There's an introduction text, there's a conclusion text at the end, there's a terms and conditions box, and there's a price conditions box. You'll see where it is in the quote, and you can essentially fill in whatever you want here. And whatever you fill in here will be the default that will appear if you don't override it later, and I'll show you how to override it. So put your defaults in here, have a look at the quote. When you go to the quote, you can see where those particular boxes are on the quote. You can see what you want to use them for. You can come to the settings and you can override the default text. This bit in the gray here, these are all default quote elements. So for example, your website link, email address, phone number, full terms and conditions link, company registration, the quote sign off, kind regards, thanks very much, whatever you want to put in here. Um, alternate address name, the alternate address name on the quote. If you have a look at the quote, you can have your planned invoice address, and then I've put, for example, planned site address. You don't have to use this, but you may have a site address or uh, delivery address or some different address, in which case, where it says site in the middle there, that you can change the word here. Our VAT number, you can put your VAT number in or not VAT registered. Default year, so this is just the default. If later on it's going to ask you for the person's name, so for example, if you send an email to Colin, it's going to go Dear Colin. But you can put a default in here if there's no name entered. So it'll say, Dear Sir, Madam, Dear Client, Dear Customer, Dear whatever. Default VAT rate, you can put that in if applicable. If you say not registered, it says VAT excluded, not registered. You can put in a 0. Is VAT included or VAT excluded? You can do VAT included or VAT excluded, or you can do VAT where applicable. And this VAT where applicable here is a custom VAT text. So this is if most of the time you're going to be VAT excluded, in which case you just put VAT excluded, or VAT included, in which case you put VAT included. If you've got a situation, for example, where some items are good VAT, some don't, etc., then you can actually just put in VAT where applicable or something else, whatever you want to do here. And whatever you type in your VAT, your custom VAT text, will be the third option that you can select here. So just change your third option there, select it here, and that's what will appear on your quotes. You can put in a optional VAT status or explanation under your VAT number. So I put, for example, not VAT registered, and you can put a VAT explanation. You'll see on your quote, when you go to your quote, where these texts appear, and then you know what you want to put in there. So you can update this for the defaults on the quote. So basically everything from here on out is all your defaults in your quote, or selecting which columns you want, which fields you want mandatory. So this is the only section on the left here, is the only section that you actually want to do, that you actually need to do as far as the general settings is concerned. So these codes here, ignore the codes. I'll get to these codes. What these codes really are doing is replacing text within your text boxes. I'll show you how that works later on. It'll make more sense when we get to that part. You've got costing alerts. You can name these. So these are set colors. All these do is when you do a costing later on, I'll show you briefly what it is, your costing breakdown. It gives you a breakdown of your costs. To the right of this, it actually gives you some alerts, some coding alerts. So these are things like order in, special order, seasonal, not available, whatever the case might be. So you just want to get an alert when you're actually going through your list of all the things that you need to order. So you can name what these special alerts are. If you don't want to use this, you don't have to use it. When you get to your price list, your pricing, prices, which I'll show you shortly, you'll be able to select one of these alerts, and this just tells you what color they'll turn and what text options there are. So you can adjust these. These are just drop-down list options. You don't have to have any if you don't want to use it, but if you do want to use that functionality, you can name these alerts. Cost prices, there are 3 different cost prices. I've got your labels, materials, and others. You can put whatever you want. You can categorize costs essentially into one of 3 categories, so that it gives you a breakdown of the different costs. So you can see, well, this much is going to labor, this much we're going, whatever. So you can change these again to be the 3 different options that you want, if you want to break down your costs. Margins, these are just for the colors. So 40% margin, 30% margin, 20%. If you put the margins in, it'll change the colors accordingly. So You can essentially tell the spreadsheet what is green, what is amber, what is red, so it changes color properly later on. First text paragraph, I'll get to that when I do this text replacement as part of that. And the last thing is just your table of your staff. So staff name, position, mobile number, and email, because then when you select their name, it gives you the other information about them on the quote. So you can set that up. These drop-down lists will make more sense later on when we get to it, and this text replacement will make more sense. This is default text on your quote, default paragraphs on your quote, and which items you want compulsory. So as you go through the spreadsheet, this will make more sense as to what this is for, and you can come back here and update this at any time. So those are the two settings tab. Now we've got the two categories. Let's start with the categories because it's slightly easier. Here are up to the 31 of these, which means that there are actually 20 different categories that you can have on your quote. So let me show you what I mean by that. If we go to the actual quote, where is it? Here we go. You'll see the quote's broken down to categories. So what it does is it will give first of all, it'll give the different categories that you've got down the down the left-hand side with the different totals. And then underneath, what it does when you actually get to the quote is it'll say, for example, price breaker categories. Here's your first category, labor. Here's a description about this category. There's the value. There's the number of line items. Then the next one is materials. Here's a description. Here's the value. Here's the number of line items, and so on. And it goes on and on and on and on. All this blank space is essentially space for more categories. So what you can do is you can actually come to your categories and you can name the categories. So I've said labor and materials. You could break this down however you want to. You can break it down to packaging. You can break it down to time. You can break it down to labor. You can break down labor even further. You can break it down however you want. And you can put in here up to 21 different categories that you can enter the name. Just make sure you don't have any duplicates. And then each of these categories, whatever you enter in this sheet, will show on the other sheets as we go along. And you'll basically have labor, material, whatever other categories. You can name the categories. I've got consumables as well here, which I wasn't actually using. And you can name other categories as you go down the list. This section here is a default text section. So you can set up some default text for each category. Now, if the text for the category is completely default, in other words, from quote to quote to quote, it doesn't change. You've just got a batch of text that you paste in that literally just goes every time I select labor. This is what it says. It doesn't change for the job. Then that's great. You can just type whatever you want in here. If you want to drop down a row within a cell, you need to press Alt and Enter in order to drop down a row. If you don't press Alt, you just press Enter, it jumps down to the next cell. So you can type up whatever you want in there. This is the space that you've got, the allowance, the space, so that you know how much space you've got that it's going to show on your quote. It doesn't expand. So you need to make sure that you fit your text within this text box. Now, I wanted to give you the default text that you type in, but I also wanted, but later on when it comes to when you're actually filling in this stuff, it'll tell you what the default text is, and you can actually type in completely new text for a particular job. So if you've typed up a standard set of instructions for one job and you get to another job and you go, well, this is completely different, you can just retype it in. You don't have to adjust the default. You can retype it in and it'll overwrite what you've got. However, there's a third option. I thought what some people are going to want to do is they're going to want to type up generic text, but they're going to want the odd word to change. So for example, if you want the generic text to say, we will provide labor to, and then there you want to actually fill in the client's name from, and you want to put in the date, the start date of the project until completion in the city of, and then you want to put the city. You can type up a generic text, and then you can use the codes presented above here to replace the text with whatever's relevant for that job. So this sounds way more confusing. Once you get your head around it, it's actually quite easy. So what you can do then is, this is where that comes up in the settings. You've got up to 18, 19, 20, 18 individual kind of words or phrases, and then 2 short paragraph texts which I'll show you how that works. So you can use any of these codes, so from code 1 to code 20 in this block, as I've done here. So if, for example, you want to replace a code, you just do the 2 square brackets, 0, 1, 2 square brackets, and wherever that text appears, let's see what happens here. You see it now puts ABC Limited. Now ABC Limited is here, which is the client company. So it replaces that code if you type it in correctly with the relevant text. So how do we set this up? Well, it's very simple. In the settings, you can say what these are. So for example, I want the client company, I want the start date, I want the city. So in the settings, you can assign the the text replacement, the name of the text replacement, something to prompt you as to what to enter, put it that way. So client name, start date, city, whatever you want to replace with these respective codes from 1 to 18. You can type the words in that you want to replace them, not the replacement text, but a description to you as to what the replacement text is required. And that will then set up these blocks here so that you know what each of these codes will be replaced with. This will be blank when you start off because you haven't actually filled it in for each client, but you'll be able to see client company, start date, city, whatever you've selected, whatever you've entered in your text replacement over there. So that will give you the option to then use these codes to replace the various text. These codes will also go into your project details when you start up down here, and then it will ask you for those codes. What is the company name? What is the start date? What is the city, etc. when you come to filling in your customer information later on. And then what that will do is it'll run that through here and go, okay, wherever you said 01, change to this. Wherever you said 02, change to that. Wherever you said 03, change to that. And it'll update your text. So you can type in a generic text, but tell the spreadsheet which words to replace. And then each time you start a new job, it'll ask you for those specific words and text phrases for this customer, and it'll replace it in the default text codes. It's the same with the replacement text 1 and replacement 2. Again, you can update what you call those here, but when you come to your project details, it'll ask you for 1 and 2, and you can put a short paragraph or phrase within there rather than a very short kind of text change here. You can type in a little bit more information, and then what that will do is, again, if you've used the code 19 or 20, it will replace that text into here. I hope that makes sense. Whatever, you can actually check this once you're done with the codes to make sure it's correct. And if you put some data into the project details, you can make sure it's correct, and it'll show you what the text codes are used for each of these categories. And you can make sure it fits within the block and everything down this side, which that'll show you what codes have been replaced. This column here is just to sort it. So you may not necessarily list them in alphabetical order, so you can't necessarily sort in alphabetical order. So if you just put 1, 2, 3, 4 down here, you can use this to sort, which means that you can essentially tell it what order this needs to be in. I don't need to put anything in there because I don't have one in there, but you can put in what order this needs to be in so that you can sort them again, because whatever order they appear in here, that's the same order they'll appear on your quote. So once you set up the categories and the text, you've got all your default text potentially containing some codes. You've got that all set up. It's now just the price list. And this price list is probably one of the most complicated things to set up because I had to try and give you some flexibility. It's as simple as it can be, and I'm just going to show it to you, and hopefully it makes sense. You can go through all of your item names, and you can give every row a unique item name. So this could be labor, it could be material, it could be consumables, it could be absolutely anything you want to do. Give it a unique name. Each row needs to be a unique name. I've given you a fairly wide column so you can go into a little bit of detail as to what it is, and then which categories it in. These categories are based on the categories that you've set up. So if you set them up first, this will be quite useful. You can assign them to the correct categories over here. You can then enter up to 3 unit types. Now, this is where it gets slightly confusing, but hopefully you'll follow. The unit types so for example, if you're buying, if one of the items you want to purchase and sell is, for example, a cardboard box. So if you say, well, you buy a cardboard box, you may be able to put cardboard box 500 by 300 by whatever. That's going to be packaging. And then you can put here a unit per box. Or if you buy them in packs of 10, you could put 10 boxes or whatever the case might be. You can put in the unit of what you purchase. So this could be liters, bags, whatever the case might be. And I've allowed for up to three. And I'll show you why later on when you actually fill in the project details. You could have, for example, like I've used an example of staff, days, and hours. So you could have, I want two staff for 5 days at 8 hours a day, whatever the case might be. But then these prices here of your minimum price, default, and maximum price, these are the price per unit. So where you've got staff days and hours, you take the minimum one, which is hours, and this will then be the price per hour. Because what the spreadsheet's going to do later on is it's going to go, okay, well, if you've got your unit three as hours and you're saying days and staff, then it's going to say, well, what it's going to do is it's going to multiply all three of them together. It's going to go, if you've got two staff with 2 days, at 8 hours, it's going to go 2 times 2 times the 8, and that's the price it's going to give you. And that's the price, that's the value it's going to multiply your labor price out by. So you want to make sure that you've got it for the kind of lowest denominator here, for lack of a better term. So if you've got two staff, 2 days, 2 hours, because the smallest component there would be the hours, that would be the one that's going to be taking the price because it's going to multiply by all three later on in order to get this labor, the price, the cost price here, and the charging price that you're going to do here. It will make more sense when we get to that sheet, but for now, just remember you can select up to 3 different units for each of these components. There is a drop-down list. The drop-down list grows as you add more stuff. So if, for example, we came in here and we put in new, then with the drop-down list, we'll then have the new input in alphabetical order. So as you type in new stuff, it adds it in. You've then got 3 different prices. These are the charge prices. You've got a minimum, you've got a maximum, and you've got a default. You don't have to use all three. You can just use the default. If it's a set price and that's what you charge, finished, job done, you always charge the same price, then just put in the default. Otherwise, you can use the minimum and the maximum. What that means is it just, when it comes to pricing, it gives you a range and goes, where do you want to charge within this range? And you can charge. You can overwrite them later on. I'll show you how. But this is just, especially if someone else is doing the costing for you, if you set it up as a manager or whatever, and someone's doing the costing, you can put in a minimum, maximum, just to guide the person who's doing the pricing as to, price within this range. To put the defaults in the middle. Then you've got the labor, materials, and other prices. Remember, you can change these headers. You can do that in the settings, labor, materials, and others. And then you can say, well, for example, this staff here, we're going staff, days, and hours. I need to charge a minimum of £40 an hour, maximum of £60 an hour, default £50 an hour. The actual labor is costing me 15 an hour. Materials is costing me £5. And the other price is £5 an hour. So what this will do is this then tallies this up and goes, well, your cost is £25 an hour, and you'll be charging between 40 and 60, most likely 50 an hour. And that's how the spreadsheet will then take it in. And then if you say, well, you've got 5 of those, if you've got 2 of those staff for 2 days at 8 hours, then it goes 2 times 2 times 8 multiplied by that is your costing, whichever you've put in, say, for example, default, and multiplying your total as the costs involved in that. And this will be what's shown on the quote. If you've got any costing alerts that are relevant for this particular thing, like, for example, special, please check, or whatever you've typed in, you can update these again. I'll show you on the settings, different colors. It tells you which color they are. You can put in what you want there, which means that when you actually select those alerts, they'll pop up later on. That gives you your margin for the minimum, margin for the default, margin for the maximum, And this will fill in as you select your quote. So this section here will be blank when you're filling in your price list. That'll fill in later on when you select your quote, and it will tell you your actual margin. So you can see that all your margins fall into the right categories. And again, these colors will change colors depending on what you've put in your settings as your margin percentages there. So once you've set this up, what you've effectively got now is you've got all your categories set up, you've got all your default text and everything set up, and you've got this price list where you've got all the different things that you could use for a job or for jobs. I've made this one a lot longer than the other one. This is 8,000 rows because I assumed a lot of people are going to have a lot of prices in here that they're not necessarily going to use for all jobs, but they might need them. So you can kind of do a comprehensive price list here, which sets it up, which then makes it easier going forward to do your costing because you've got all your default prices set up, ready to go. So once these 4 tabs are all ready, you've got all your pricing, you've got your category set up with a default text, change the codes for any words you want to be able to change. You've got your settings all set up, all the default text for your quote, etc., all these set up, and you've got your logo input. You're now ready to save this as a blank costing spreadsheet. You can I'll unlock this on the version that you would purchase. So you will be able to hide these categories, the price list, the settings, the logo. If you want to, you'll be able to hide all of those to protect them, but you don't need to. Then let's move on to the next stage, which are the red components. So this is your project details. This is the one that you'll start with, and all of this will be blank when you're starting off. You have a project name, client company, quote reference. So this will be the reference in your quote date, client reference, client VAT number. You see, some of these aren't compulsory. This little tick that appears next to it, if you did have something that was compulsory, would have a red cross. If you said, well, I don't need to include the project name, then you can just go to the settings. You can go here where it says project name. You can select a blank cell there, which means when you go back to project details, it doesn't ask you for the project name. So you can set up what stuff you want that's compulsory and what things you don't want. Because I said yes, I'm going to put in the project name, and then it goes, okay. So you need to make sure that there are no red alerts or little crosses or anything on here. At any stage when you're filling in any of the spreadsheet, you can go to the dashboard and you can have a look down here in the section here where it says alerts and warnings. And in fact, these two. These ones will have red and yellow warnings here if there's any issues on any of these tabs. And underneath here, there are various other ones one other one by the looks of things, one other one which will show up if you have an alert, and it'll give you a text there as to what the alert is for. But this here will show you if there are any red or yellow alerts, and then just go to the respective tab and change them. So if, for example, we took that out and you went to the dashboard, you see there's one red alert on the project details. So then you know, okay, here it is, it's a red cross. I need to fill in the project name. Contact name is the client. Again, you don't have to have this in here if you take it off from the settings, but if you leave it blank, then it'll show up whatever's in your settings here as the no contact will be Sir, Madam. So that will show as the default. And then you can select the staff name if it's compulsory. If so, if you select that, then that comes from this table and the settings. And not only does it come from this table to select this person, but it'll include the position, the number, and email as well on the quote, which you can fill in here. There's the invoice address. There's a site address. You can change what this might not be site. This might be something else address. Again, you can change it in the settings and select what's compulsory so that people will fill in the respective blocks. Again, if you double click on there, pressing Alt Enter will drop down a row within that cell. Line item count. This is if you actually if the person is going to want a detailed quote. In other words, all the different prices. So if you need to produce something for your client, which says, here are all the different items that I'm billing, the itemized kind of billing thing, which I'll show you. This is a quote breakdown, which you can send to them here. If you plan on sending them this, then what I would do is I would tick this box to go, yes, include the line item count. What this means is on the quote, when you look at each category at the bottom here, it says number of line items 3. Now, if you're not going to send them the breakdown, you don't want to confuse them by saying they're 3 line items because they're not going to know what that means. In which case, then go to the project details and take that off. So when you go back to the quote, it doesn't show. If you are going to send them an itemized billing, and you still don't have to put it on there, but if you are going to send them an itemized billing and you want to say how many items, then click that box because then on the quote it will say number of line items 3, because then labor, when you send them the quote breakdown, you're able to see labor, they're 3 line items under labor. That's what it does. So you can leave that on, take it off. That's your first section. The second one is your category selections. So what this is, I wanted to give you a very quick way of reducing the number of items on your price list if required. So this might not make sense, but hopefully it does. What you're able to do is you're able to go and say the status of unselected categories. So this will all be blank to start off with. And then what you can do is you can say, well, what is the default? Is it to ignore everything, or is it optional, or is it compulsory? I'll show you what the breakdown is here. I'm going to select compulsory. Because I selected compulsory, it says, okay, which of the different categories are optional and which of the different categories are ignored? The reason I've done it like this is so that you can actually say, well, default compulsory, however, consumables is optional and there's no ignored, which means that now it says, okay, categories, labor is compulsory meaning a tick. Consumables is optional, which gives you the question mark, and the red cross is ignored. There's nothing ignored. What this means is when I come to pricing the spreadsheet, anything that's marked as labor, I have to pick at least one cost price that's marked as labor, or at least one costing price that's breakdown. So here, for example, where you've got all of your item names, labor, I need to pick at least one of them that's labor, and I need to pick at least one of them that's materials because those two are compulsory. However, consumables, I want them in the drop-down list to be able to select, but I might not select any of them, in which case I put it as optional. If there's a case of a particular job where, let's just say, for example, I know 100% I'm not using any consumables in this job, then what I do is I go and I say ignore consumables, because what that means is the consumables won't even show up in the drop-down list when I'm selecting the items. So if you've got a whole bunch of categories, say, for example, you've used 20 categories and you know this job's only going to use 10 of them, but you might need some from 2 others, then what you can do is you can, whichever is the majority, so if the majority of them are going to be compulsory or the majority of them are going to be ignored, I could say, for example, ignore everything, in which case these two come up as optional and compulsory, but I can say, I just want labor in this one, it's labor only. So now labor is compulsory, everything else is ignored, there are no optionals. So essentially you use this default and these two to set up what this is. If this is correct, what you've got here, based on different categories, just know that the tick mark means it's compulsory and it must be included. The question mark means it's optional. It will be in the drop-down list, but you don't have to use it. And ignore means you actually can't select it. And if you select anything in that category, it will flag up as an issue. So you can essentially set up your categories. What you may want to do is if you go, well, I don't really know for this job, it's going to be as I go along. Then what you can do is you can select everything as optional and don't do anything there, which means that everything will be in the drop-down list, but you don't have to select anything. So it all just depends on this one here is really just setting what the majority of them are, and then these two are assigning whichever ones fall into the other ones. So let's say everything's compulsory, and I'm just going to switch consumables over to optional. Check that, that's correct. I'm ready to go. Now these figures won't be in here because you wouldn't have selected anything, and I'll tell you what these codes mean in a minute or two. In fact, let me share what the codes mean. What the codes mean is that if you see code A, it means that you've got a price. So the spreadsheet's found a price that you've done a costing, but it's in a category that you've said was to be ignored. That will flag up as an A and it'll turn red. So you need to address that. You either need to go and say, well, actually, this category is not ignored, or you need to go and remove the costing from it. Issue B, if you see a B in here, what this will mean is that you've got no price Um, and it's a compulsory category. So for example, this consumables, if we said that this consumables was required, you see there's B because there's zero value calculated for consumables, but you said it's compulsory. I haven't selected anything which gives you the code of B. So I can either go and select something in consumables, or I can come here and I can type in an override, which then gives me a value, which then is acceptable, or I can come to the options and say consumables are optional, which then is okay. So you need to make sure that all of these codes are green essentially once you finish doing your pricing. While you're busy with your pricing, your costing, when in item selection, this may well flag up as red. That's fine temporarily, but by the end of it, you want that to be complete. These are the different codes that you've set. So you've told it what text can be overwritten by different text in the settings, which we've been through, and this will give you a list of those items. And what the spreadsheet does is it actually checks your codes that you put in. And if you've used a code, then it marks this with an X. So if I take up, for example, London, it will then be a red X. If I haven't used code number 3, it won't ask me for anything here. It won't bother asking me. This will just be blank and it won't ask me for anything. But if I have used the code, it'll go, you need this code. So then it says city. Now for each job, then I'll just type in whatever city is for that job, and that will then go through the code replacement. These two texts, you can type in the text that you want to use for these particular jobs. And again, you can see here, because I haven't used code number 2, it doesn't ask for it. I haven't, did I use code number 1? Yes. So I've used code number 1, the replacement text, so it does ask for it. And that's why I've put in something there. Here it doesn't, because I haven't. If I were to have used code number 20, then that would be a red cross telling me to type something in. So this is what you update for your project. I would update this at the beginning. I would update this at the beginning, get that ready, and then update this at the beginning. And then this, you want to then go and do your costing. Item selection, this is where you essentially select all your prices. So you go to all the prices. Here you've got a drop-down list of all the different things that you've got. Consumables are in the drop-down list because I marked them as optional. If I did go there again, let's just show you how this works. If I went here and said consumables were in the ignored, when you then come to the item selection, that goes red because you shouldn't have selected it, and you don't actually have consumables. So this one won't go in. I'll show you in a minute why I've selected the consumable, but it's not going under consumables. Excuse me. So here you select the item from the drop-down list, and you can select an item more than once. It doesn't matter. You can select all the things involved in this job, and then it asks you for your quantity. So because this says units, it only asks you for one quantity. So units, 2, job done, finished. Where it says here, for example, staff, because it's staff, days, and hours, it then asks me for the 3 different columns. And if I were to have left that out, it would go yellow to go, what is this, please? Because it's expecting a quantity because I've got hours in there. So what I've said here is 2 staff, 8 days, 1 hour a day, and 1 staff, 6 days, 1 hour a day. And then when you get to your price, it gives you, there's nothing in there because there's nothing in there, but this one will give you your recommended price in the drop down, and you can just select it. If you say, well, actually, in this case, I want to go for the cheaper option, you don't have to select it, you just type over it 40, and it will say that that's fine. If you actually type in 38, for example, it now goes red because it says it's under the minimum price. So you can still do it, but it just alerts you to the fact that it's under the minimum price. If you were to put in there 60, it would say that's acceptable. If you say 65, it turns yellow, tells you it's acceptable, but it just tells you that it's over the max. So this will be based on your guidelines that you've set here. Your default, if you just want to go, I want to just do recommended for everyone here, just go down and select each one, and it'll give you the option in a drop-down list. So then once you've done your costing and your quantities, it then gives you an optional override. So for example, this one was in consumables, but I've said in this case, just because there's only one, just put it in with materials, that's fine. So it just lumps it in with the materials. So you can override which category it's in on the sheet. Again, if you said you're not using it, it won't appear in the drop-down list. If you said, I might use it, it will appear in the drop-down list, but you can select it, leave it as in the default category, or override the category. These details here, I'll show you where these appear. These ones actually just, you don't have to enter them, but they appear on these two sort of quote breakdown. You'll see the details here, and on your costing, you'll see the details here. So you can put in some kind of project, sorry, item selection. You can put in some kind of details specific to the job. So you can put in something there. I don't know, you can maybe write next to the staff labor, you could write something like, the staff member will be Colin or Chris or whatever the case might be. If you want to put some details in there, it's totally up to you. But this will appear on what gets sent to the customer if they want a breakdown, and it will get put onto what you have as your costing breakdown. If you scroll across, it gives you the line total, so you can double check. For example, this particular staff, how many days at this rate per hour staff, you can do the maths in your head, multiply it out, have a look, make sure it's correct. There's your line total, there's your line cost, and there's your line margin. So it gives you those prices to the right-hand side. That's how you would set up all your different pricing for the particular jobs. Now, then you go back to the project details, and then you'll see these calculated prices fill in over here, and it'll see the used price, which should be the same. You've got an override one in the middle. This override column serves one of two purposes. First of all, if you actually want to do a quote, but you're going, well, actually, this is a very simple quote to do. I don't need to go through and select all the items. I don't care about the cost price. I don't want to do an itemized billing. What I actually just want to do is I know the prices per category, and I just want to put the override in. So before, if this was completely blank and filled in nothing in here, and you went to the project details, this would all be blank. That would all, or they'd actually say zero. This would all say zero. Then what you can do is you can actually override, and you can just type in whatever price you want. So you don't even have to do a costing. You can just put in the override price. If you do that, bear two things in mind. Number one, you're not going to have a costing or breakdown. So you're not going to have that option because you've just used the override price. And also, if you have used the price, so for example, if I've used this price of the costing and I've got to 1580 and I go, well, listen, in this case, let's just charge this person 1600 and I put that in, it will use that, but I must just bear in mind that when I give them the breakdown, the costing breakdown, the quote breakdown, will show the total, the new price, but when you sum up these, it won't show the correct price. So you just need to be aware of that. If you're going to change these prices, your customer may well come to you, will go, hold on, how come when I tell you this up, it's 1580, but you've charged me 1600? So in that case, I would either not send them the breakdown. If you do send them the breakdown, just bear in mind, it's not going to adjust these individual line figures to match the total. It's just going to put the new total in. So you just need to be aware of that if you're going to change these. My advice would be either use the costing or use the override and don't use the costing, one or the other. But if you do override something where you've done the costing, just bear in mind that it won't match the breakdown prices. But it will show you override in the quote. Whatever you got in the override is king. That will go through, that will be shown, and it'll ignore whatever's in here. But the only place it won't do it is on your itemized breakdown. It will show the total, but the individual line items won't match with the total. It'll match with what's been calculated. All right. So you can override things here, or you can just use the calculated. And at this point, you'll be ready for to move to the quote. But there are a few other red tabs that you can do. So there's the item selection I'll come to later because that's not really to do with your quote. That's actually to do with a bit of reporting. Oh, sorry, no, I've been mistaken. The item selection we've done, it's one of these other ones. You've got your text override. This is all your stuff, the default text. So your brief project description, introduction text, etc. All of these you've already filled in on the settings, so you don't have to fill them in here because you've already done the settings. But just say, for example, your brief project description or your introduction text, for example, maybe a generic, dear, whatever, thanks for the opportunity to submit this quote. Whereas you may know this person personally and you want to personalize a little bit and say, it was great meeting at the networking event or whatever. You can come in here and type in a different introduction text. Anything typed in any of these boxes here will simply overwrite what you've got in the settings tab for this particular project only. Alternatively, if you want to leave them blank, you can. The only one that isn't really filled in is the brief project description because this is going to be varied for every single client. So you'd want to put in something about the project here, whatever it is that you want to do. So this is the only one you must fill in. The rest of these ones here are just stuff that you've already got in the settings, but you can override them if you want to. In fact, here it tells you what you've got in the settings, so you can actually check here and go, okay, that'll do, leave it blank, or oh no, that's not quite right for this customer. And then if you type something new in here, well, then it won't take this, it'll take what you've got here and it'll put that onto the quote. So this page is, that block is essential really. The rest of it is uh, the rest of them are optional. You can on the settings tab, I have put on the right-hand side here, introductory terms and condition price and what have you. So these ones, these are the four options. If we go back to text override, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you have one of them in your settings, for example, if you say this introduction text, if you left this blank, then you can mark introduction as required, because then what will happen is because there's no blank, you mark it as required. When they do the project, the text override, this will have a red cross and they'll need to fill that in. So you can adjust and set this up as you want to in order to decide which of these fields are compulsory. And then last but not least, you've got your category text override. Now, if all your category text are fine, then they're fine. This one's slightly different because I didn't want to actually have what this one does is it gives you a list of your categories that you've got that are used in this job. It'll say labor material, for example, and then I'll say, okay, cool, labor material, labor. I wish to say whatever it is you wish to say. Now, if your default ones are correct, so in other words, where we've put in these codes and that is correct, and you go, I just want that, then you don't actually have to do anything on this one. Because these two are green, it shows you that they're two that you can select. So you can come and select them. So for example, labor and materials. And when you select them, it'll tell you here what it's going to say. If that's correct, then done. You don't even have to select them if you're confident. If you're not sure what they do say, just select the ones you're not sure about. It'll tell you what they say. Once you've selected them, it tells you what they say. If you go, that's fine, then just leave this blank. If you're looking at this going, well, actually, even though you've replaced the text, this isn't correct, I need to type something in here. You can type a new one in here. Now, when you type in a new description, whatever you type in here, it will show on your quote. So whatever you type in here will show on your quote. If you say, well, these two are fine, then you didn't even need to select these. You don't even need to use this tab at all. You only really come to this tab and use it if you want to override or if you want to check what the text is saying and you want to override it. So even if this was completely blank, it wouldn't matter. You would just use your defaults and do what you asked. If you want to check them, as I said, you can select them, check them, and then go, yeah, that's correct. These are correct. If not, retype something in here. If that's correct, then you're good to go. And that is the end of the data entry. Once you've done these 4 sheets per quote, you can come back to your dashboard and you can have a look. If everything here is green and it says quote is ready, then you know, okay, cool, that's all good. If anything here is flagging up and showing you that there's something red that needs to change, then go and adjust it. You can see your overall margin. You can see your categories, quoted prices, total cost, labor, materials, and others per category, margin value. These are your categories here, and it says code replacement. So this is the description for each category. here and it tells me that I've used code replacement. It'll either say code replacement or default text, which is the standard default text, or override text, which means that you've got something in here. So if I put in a new description here, for example, for labor, then when you go back to your dashboard, it says labor's got some custom text, which is essentially what you've overwritten over here. So you can check your dashboard, make sure everything's correct, all your pricing, etc. Quote is ready, no alerts, all good to go. That means that you can then go and have a look at the other four green tabs, which I will get into next. So yeah, hopefully this is the third part of the video with quote. The quote, if it says on your dashboard that the quote is ready, then when you come to quote, you'll see the quote and it's ready. There are all different things going on here. You've got, in fact, I forgot something. I forgot something in the text override. Actually, where was it? In the settings. I forgot these in the settings. There are some other settings. I'll get to it when I get to the quote. You've got your quote template. It's 10 pages long. If you were to save this as a PDF, it would be 10 pages. You can see where all the information's popped up. And some of this you don't have to have. If you don't have a second address, for example, then this will be white. It won't show the gray and it'll be blanked out. So your invoice will look different to this. I've populated as much as I can in this invoice. You'll see all your different stuff. You can come through and you can check it. Total quote value, all the different categories, prices, all the text you've got that you selected, kind regards and manager name, etc. This is page 1. And all of this will be set up according to what you've got. If it's not right, go into the respective settings, adjust what you need to adjust in the settings or in the project tab, wherever it's broken along the way. Then from page 2 onwards, you're going to have 3 categories per page. So it'll give the category, the text, price breakdown of categories at the top of each page, line items, etc. And then I've only got 2, so the rest is all blank, but the rest will appear here if you've got more over the next number of pages, so you can scroll down. After those, I think there's 7 pages of that, which gets you to page 8. Page 9 is a bunch of kind of terms and conditions, so you can break them into section 1, section 2, and that is on your settings tab. I forgot to show you that, the settings, because it was scrolling further down, but those are just further down here. So you can put section 1, the header, type some notes, section 2, whatever you want to call it. So you can say, for example, labor, and you can say we work Monday to Fridays this time, blah, blah, blah. You can say materials. You can say materials will be delivered to site previously, whatever the case might be. You can put your kind of itemized terms and conditions for your quote. You don't have to use these if you don't want to, but if you do, you can itemize them, put the text in each block, and that will appear on page 9 of the quote. Page 10, this is the only thing you actually type into the quote. And just because it's a long text, some people want to type a whole bunch of little text, and I've just put some of this Lorem Ipsum stuff, generated text on here. But this is a big cell, and this is a kind of a big cell. What I would suggest doing, instead of trying to type it into the cell, which can be a bit of a faff, type it into Word, come here, copy the text, paste it directly into the top here. So paste what you've got from Word directly into this toolbar here. And then once you've done that, it'll appear, and then you can just go and adjust the length of it to make sure it fits. So you've got these 2 blocks here. And again, you don't have to use these, but if you want to put a whole bunch of little text straight from Word, paste it into here. You've got 2 blocks, make sure it fits into the designated area. And this just stays as it is for every quote, doesn't change. You can just put this in as a default at the beginning. And that then provides your 10-page quote. Now, you may not want to have a whole bunch of blank pages in the middle. So what you can do is if you go to File, Print, and instead of going to this, you actually just say Print to PDF. Where's Print to PDF? There we go. It says which pages do you actually want to enter, which pages do you want to do. So you can say print selection, print pages. You can actually just go in and put whichever pages you want. So you can select the pages, whichever ones you want to include. So you may include page 1, you may include page 2, you might leave these ones blank and then just include the two bottom ones because you've got stuff there, or you may not be using the two bottom ones. So you can essentially select which ones you want to actually print to PDF and select those different pages, print to PDF. So you've got yourself a nice PDF only containing the pages which you've actually got text on. If you just do file save as and save as a PDF, it'll save all 10 pages. If you do print to PDF, you can select which pages in order to be able to print just the pages you want. Because obviously you don't want to have all the blank spaces. Unit totals. I'll get back to this because this is a bit of you don't need to use this. It's somewhat complicated. The last two sheets you've got your quote breakdown, your costing breakdown. Very similar, but this is something that you could also save as a PDF and send to the customer if they want a breakdown, because this just gives a line price of what you're charging them, the category price, and a complete breakdown. So if you've got all this in place and you've set up a pricing and you know the customer's going to want this, you can send them. It breaks down to categories, gives all the different items, shows them exactly what they've been costed for. Costing breakdown, the same thing, but it gives you then the labor, materials, and others, so you can see your prices that you've got set here. And it also gives you those costing alerts we spoke of and told you at the top how many of each you've got. So this would be used internally to then go and place orders or make sure you've done everything. And this will give you those alerts that you've set up, and it'll give you a breakdown of your cost as well. These prices here are actually your cost breakdown. So these are your cost, whereas in your quote breakdown, this is what you've quoted, and these are your costs. So you can make sure when you're doing the project that you stick to within your budget, so to speak. This is for you internally. Your unit totals. This is something I didn't actually bank on, but I decided afterwards to leave it in. And the reason is it's a little bit complicated, but so if you don't know how to use this, just ignore it. But it might be helpful to you if you want to do. And I thought particularly of labor. So you may have a whole bunch of staff, various different labor items that you've entered in at various different rates. And what you actually want to know is how much time is this project going to take? So what you can then come and do is you can come and select if the staff, it says which are the included units. So if I say, for example, staff, it says there's 3 items partly matching with other entries. And then I say days, and then I say hours. It goes, 3 items perfectly matching the above description. And if I click on here now, it'll give me the 3 items. So staff labor 1, staff labor 2, staff labor 3. Now, by default, they're all included. But if I only want to include, for example, labor 1 and labor 2, and I don't want to include labor 3, I can select labor 1 and labor 2. So it's constantly giving me a thing. It says 3 items perfectly match. You've selected 2 of 3 perfect matches. Is that correct? Yep, that's correct. That's what I want to do. So now what you can see is you can see total staff 3, total days 14, total hours 2. Now these aren't hours multiplied by days and staff, etc. What these are is these are just the columns. So hours, we put 1 hour a day, therefore it's summed it up as 2. So these may not be relevant. What might be relevant is this one. So staff times by days is 22, days times by hours is 14, staff times by hours is 3. So staff times by days times by hours is 22. So this here tells me that staff times by days times by hours is 22. So this whole project with these 2 staff together, if I were to exclude clear them, so I've got everyone, all 3 items matching perfectly, then that means it's 28 hours. So I can look at that if I've included all staff, and I can go, this project all in all is going to take 28 hours because it's staff times by days times by hours. So in some cases, you may look at these items. I've shown all of these values, but they're not always relevant. So please don't look at this and go 3 hours, that's in total. It's not. That's just where we've put in the item select. And it's literally just summing up this column here, which is 3, which may or may not be correct. So because I've made the spreadsheet that's dynamic for everybody to use, it depends what you're looking at. So you really have to think about what items you've included here, what you're looking at, and it'll show you. This will be particularly useful for staff, I think, for hours, to see staff times days times hours, 28 is a total. But you may also want to select other products where you've got, for example, kilograms. If you want to put all your stock onto one list and you want to tally up everything that's in kilograms, it'll then give you a total of all the stuff that's in kilograms, for example. So you'll be able to have a look at that. So have a look at, in fact, let's try something like that for now. So if we said items in liters, so all the different items in liters, it's not found anything in liters, units. One item matching perfectly in units. Say, for example, this material one, if you had others in units, then you can see total units too. So it'll just give you the averages. These ones don't tally up because you haven't selected the second items. So have a play around with this, see if it makes sense. But what I would suggest doing is, because these figures are a little bit ambiguous as to what they are, I would suggest just for the first few times you use it, make sure you're looking at the correct figure and just do a little bit of math. So just check and double check if it is correct. But I've tried to label it correctly. Have a look at the text down here, and just make sure you're looking at the correct number that's valid, that's relevant to what you've selected to show you. But the idea behind this was particularly for staff when you wanted to see how many hours you've got different staff at different rate, trying to tally them all up. You can come in and select them and see what's going on. Whew, that was a long demo video. I hope it makes sense. If there is anything I haven't explained and you kind of looking at this going, how does this work? And if you want to purchase this, if you purchase the spreadsheet and you're a little bit confused or concerned, drop me an email and just ask me some specifics. I might actually do some other videos to help with this, because this is a abnormally large standard product. But hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, if you're using this for your business, hopefully it's doing the job for you. As I did say earlier, when you go through these sheets, you can actually just use basically the red ones, set up everything here initially. If you want to do a quick quote, for example, if this is all pre-set up, you can ignore the price list if you want to. You don't even have to worry about that. You can just come to project details, set this up, tell it what you want here, put in your override values, and input what you need to. You don't even have to select item selection if you put override values and if you know what they all are. You can go to this, you can leave this because you've already set it up and your quote should be ready. But if you just check on the dashboard and it says quote is ready and there are no alerts, and you look through this and you look and you go, yeah, that all makes sense. Margins okay, prices look okay, then you're ready to go. If there are any errors on here, then fix them on the relevant tabs. But update the black ones and the blue ones first, red ones for each project, and the green ones should be ready for you to view as needed. I hope that helps you, and I hope that this helps you do costings very quickly. If you, as always with these kind of spreadsheets, if you're looking at this and you're going, this is great, but it's not quite right for me, but I want something similar, do get in touch. We can discuss a custom version. But if this works for you and works for your business, I wish you all the best. Thank you very much and goodbye.